Hello and welcome back to Neuroscience Shorts, not Pants, Shorts. This is a series of videos all about neuroscience facts, made simple and easy to understand for anybody. My name is Dr. Lana Jones, and I am a neuroscientist. So I think neuroscience is for everyone, and I'm here to take some of these concepts that might be intimidating and simplify them so that everybody can understand them very clearly. So our topic for today is a very important topic, and it involves a barrier. It's the blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier is actually a semi-permanent, permeable, very selective boundary or barrier between the blood and the brain. But before we get too deep into that, let's remember really quick the different types of cells we find in the nervous system. First, we have our pals, the neurons, and these are also referred to as the gray matter of the brain. We also have glia cells. These cells make up the white matter of the brain. And glia cells have various functions, which we're going to go over, one of which is the blood-brain barrier. One function of glial cells is to provide support and scaffolding for our neurons. So some of our neurons rest within the scaffolding of glial cells. They create this kind of a web where the neurons can rest within the grooves. Specifically, the cells are called astrocytes that serve this function. Astrocytes also have other functions of clearing and cleaning up and providing nutrients. We also have the cleaning up of the debris. Some of our astrocytes are involved in kind of removing the garbage or the waste from our brain and our neuronal systems. They act similarly to white blood cells within the blood. So kind of our immune cells involved in cleanup and removal of waste. We call these cells microglia. Still glia, just microglia. The glial cells also serve as the myelin sheath. So axons are wrapped in a myelin sheath, and this is done by specific types of glial cells, very important in neuronal conduction. Oligodendrocytes serve this function in the central nervous system, where a cell called Schwann cells serve this myelin sheath function in the peripheral nervous system. But we also have this problem with our blood-brain barrier. So remember, the blood is circulating, and there's some certain things that we want to allow into the brain from the blood, but then there's other things circulating in the blood that we don't want to allow, right? Because sometimes there's some nasty stuff in the blood. So this barrier works as a way to stop some of these nasty things that happen in your blood. I mean, basically your blood is kind of like a petri dish, picking up little nasty things that you may have an open cut. One of those little nasty things may involve bacteria, any kind of yucky little harmful thing. Another thing would be a virus, and we can't let these bacteria and viruses get into the brain because they could shut down the whole system. We also have things that are good for the body that come through the blood, and we have to allow those things. So the blood-brain barrier has to be selectively permeable to things like oxygen, which we need in our blood, right? We also have to allow some other smaller molecules to permeate or pass through the barrier. One of these is water, right? So we have to allow certain things through because we need to get that water inside of our brain. Don't forget about glucose. So we need sugar to power the brain, and glucose is actually a very large molecule, and it requires a transport protein to get past the blood-brain barrier because it basically just has to call an Uber so it can get in. So when we're talking about the blood-brain barrier, it's made up of specific parts. So the basis, you can see from this diagram, the inside of this would be like a cross-section of a capillary. So you see the red blood cell inside the capillary. You also see some bacteria in there and small. So as you can see here, the outside of the capillary is surrounded by what we call endothelial cells. And these endothelial cells are specialized cells, and so which their structure, they form together this tight junction. So the tight junction, there is a small gap, but it prevents large molecules or large items to, it's a physical barrier. So the blood-brain barrier is actually a physical barrier to large items where it's blocking bacteria from getting from the blood into the brain. It's also allowing oxygen and small molecules. And as I said, our sugar has to call an Uber, so it's actually actively transported across the blood-brain barrier. This is also, the blood-brain barrier is also made up of nerve cells, and the nerve cells in this picture are actually astrocytes. So the astrocytes' feet kind of reach out and help to form the areas of the blood-brain barrier. So again, this blood-brain barrier is so important in preventing the yucky stuff inside of our blood from getting into our brain and affecting our neurons negatively. But it also allows the smaller molecules that we need, like gases, and then of course glucose, which is transported into the brain so that they can be used. It's really important to understand how the blood-brain barrier works, and it also becomes very important to understand the mechanisms of the blood-brain barrier when we start thinking about drug delivery. I hope this has been helpful. I wanted to say thank you for watching, and I hope you understand a little bit better about how the blood-brain barrier works.